Hello and welcome to episode number 28 of Excel TV. Can't believe we're still around, can you? Oz, how you doing?
And I'm so happy we got Dan Fylstra here. I might bust open his fridge, hashtag NA errors all over everything. So I'm going to try to restrain myself, but I do have my future man hat on. So, Jordan.
Well, thanks, Oz. Thanks for that always great thing that I can't, Jordan. And now we're in Cleveland, home of great food, terrible football teams, and lots of Excel MVPs. So, how about you, Daniel? How are you?
Very, very good. Thanks for having me, guys. So this is Incline Village, Nevada. It's on the north shore of Lake Tahoe. It's a real beautiful place. It's really lovely outside, kind of a resort destination. It's where we hang out most of the time for Frontline Systems.
Welcome.
Welcome, Dan. Welcome to the show. So, everybody, this is Rick Rantham, rickrantham.com, also of Excel.tv. I'm here tonight in breezy Los Angeles, California, at the Standard Hotel. Tonight is brought to you by Diet Red Bull.
Oh, well, I tell you what. Here is some big-ass barrel braggot from Rogue.
That's good stuff. So, whatever your
Yes, it is.
whatever your power, you're messing up my commercial here, all right?
Oh, okay.
Pipe down. It's anticlimactic now. Whatever your power pivot feels like a drop down. Diet Red Bull. It's what's for supper. Jordan, can you take it away with the Excel Challenge of the Week?
Sure. So, as usual, another product placement that we haven't been paid for, but remember, Red Bull, you can always come and pay us money. We'll take check, cash, money orders, cars, whatever you have. We'll take free Red Bull even. And before I jump into the challenge, I just want to bring up some trivia that many of our viewers don't know, but this is actually kind of a milestone for the show, and it has to do with our guest. Daniel is the first person we've had on who has a Wikipedia page. I think that's something. I've always dreamed of having a Wikipedia page. I try to write my own and they get rid of them. So thank you for helping us pass that milestone. Okay, so let's jump to the challenge. Okay, so last time we were here, boy, it feels so long ago, we said we were wondering, before they were called Excel tables, what name did they go by? I'll tell you a list. They were a little pared down to what they are now, and especially the Mac version, I think, up until the most recent version of Excel. The version before that had lists instead of tables, which was such a pain. So who was our week's winner? Well, it was David H. He answered correctly on the Excel TV blog page, so make sure to go check that out. Also, to check out what's going on with our contest and everything else that's going on online. So this next question is brought to us by Sylvia Juhas, friend of the show at Excel.com, and remember to also check out her Twitter. She asks this Excel sort of related question. I thought this was a really interesting one. What fantastic cult movie also just celebrated its 30-year anniversary? So this isn't specifically an Excel question, but it also parallels Excel's 30th year anniversary. So if you think you know the answer to this question, you can go to our website, excel.tv. You can also let us know over Twitter and over Facebook. Now, I just want to let everyone know, I know that I usually do the prizes. I usually mail them out during the breaks, but since I've been busy moving, I know there's been a delay. So remember, if you win, expect a 6 to 8 year delay. No, I'm just kidding. Just expect a few weeks and everything will be set in due time. If I've missed a prize from you, if you think I've missed a prize, feel free to email to me through any of the social channels and we'll take a look. So back to you, Rick.
And Jordan especially appreciates it whenever people give him feedback on Twitter. So reach out to him.
Yes, if you have anything you need to say,
that's the best place to say something on Twitter. Leave a comment right on his blog. He likes that a lot too. And I like the way you served that up, Jordan. You said it's not. This question is not exactly an Excel question, and I would say it's not. It doesn't have anything to do with Excel really whatsoever.
Yeah, but well, it's sort of. it came from Sylvia, who's a friend of the show,
Exactly.
who does Excel.
Yeah, I do Red Bull product placement, so there you go. So, our special guest of the week, Mr. Dan Fylstra from Frontline Systems and Solver.com. As Jordan served up to begin with, not often we ever talk to somebody who has their own Wikipedia page. I tried to start a Wikipedia page one time, and they took it right down. So welcome, Dan. Welcome to the show. I understand that you might have something to do with a little program called VisiCalc. Would you mind telling us what that is?
Oh, sure. Actually, there's probably a lot of listeners who don't know what it is because it's been so long. You know, I think I know the answer to this question 30 years ago because I've been around that long, and I think one of the very first dates I ever went on with my fiancée, who became my spouse, was to that movie. But I won't say anything because we want to give people, a chance to guess it. But so, yeah, and so VisiCalc is actually at least that old. It was 19, we started working on it in 1978. So there was an interesting story. There were really three people involved. Dan Bricklin, who really had the idea for the electronic spreadsheet. And this was in an era when personal computers were just arriving on the scene, but most people were using minis and mainframes. And then Bob Frankston, who was the friend of Dan's, who was the guy who wrote all the code of the original VisiCalc on the Apple II. And then I was the third player, really in a marketing role. I brought it to Steve Jobs and to Mike Markkula at Apple and went around demoing it to all the Apple's regional distributors and dealers and so on. And I kind of played a product management role, too, about what features we had to have in the first version. And I helped finance it. And there was actually, you have to realize this was a real early startup situation, so the VisiCalc, the first version, was developed on one Apple II that I managed to buy directly from Steve Jobs at a negotiated price, and then loan to Bricklin and Frankston. Never got that one back. It's in a museum somewhere now or something. But so VisiCalc was developed at a time. Dan actually, there's a story behind this too. Dan Bricklin, all three of us were MIT Course 6.3 graduates. It's the MIT Computer Science program. And Dan and I were both in Harvard Business School 1 year apart. I was, I guess I had just graduated and he was finishing up. So he had, we both had the same professor for finance in the first year, Charles Kelso. And Dan actually had the idea for the electronic spreadsheet, sitting in a classroom, watching the professor going back and forth on a blackboard. It's a chalkboard. I don't know if some people may not know what that is. Right. But it's with, it's something you write on and you erase. And so there was a financial projection up on the chalkboard, and Professor Kelso was erasing and rewriting and erasing and rewriting and playing what if, essentially. And Dan, who had worked on full-screen word processors at Digital Equipment Corporation, that's a mini computer maker, by the way. They're no longer around. But he got the idea that you could do the same sort of thing you do with a full-screen word processor, but for numbers. So anyway, Dan, this is a true story, Dan actually went to talk to Professor Kelso about this and wanted to get an assessment of the business idea. And Kelso was an expert. He knew what companies, large companies, Fortune 500 companies were doing. They were all doing financial modeling and projections, but they were doing it on time sharing, using systems like FinPlan and SimPlan, and these are tools that they would use actually through like a teletype terminal with a command language. So, being a Harvard Business School professor, I guess understanding the market pretty well, he really told Dan Bricklin that there wasn't too much potential for the spreadsheet because the market was already well served by these time sharing solutions. But he said he had this student named Dan Fylstra the previous year who had actually gone off and started a company. So we were starting to do software publishing for personal computers, and maybe he should talk to me. So Dan Bricklin called me up and came over, and we talked, and VisiCalc was like a gleam in the eye. It didn't have a name at this point. It was a gleam in Dan's eye. And actually, I did think it was a good idea. Yeah. I thought it was a very strong idea, and so that's when I loaned him the first Apple II, and he began experimenting with it. and it kind of went from there into a pretty serious project, and then it took the greater part of a year to build a real commercial version. The code was actually written on a Prime mini computer because you couldn't actually develop something like this on Apple II. The Apple II was so slow and so primitive in terms of its processor speed that Frankston had to deal with the fact that the human operator could get ahead of the calculations just by typing, and so he was buffering keystrokes and so on. Anyway, so VisiCalc came out in a way that was very synergistic with the Apple II and what Apple Computer was doing and what Computerland was doing, because at this time computer stores were very new. They were just coming into being, and Computerland was a franchise organization. It was opening stores or helping independent operators, open stores around the country, and so we all kind of helped each other, and it really led to a situation where VisiCalc helped sell the Apple II, but the Apple II also helped sell VisiCalc, really made it feasible, and Computerland were the people doing the selling. So now that was a long time ago, kind of in a galaxy far, far away, and things have changed quite a bit. VisiCalc kind of was ultimately superseded on the IBM PC by Lotus 123, and ultimately Lotus 123 was superseded by Excel, first on the Mac and then on Windows. And this probably isn't over yet.
Wow.
Now, actually, a lot of our attention is on Excel Online and Google Sheets.
Yeah. I'm curious. I remember those days when you talk about, that time long ago. I remember taking out a bank loan to buy a computer, and bringing it home on a like a dolly thing. When I was in the Navy, and I brought it back to the barracks on this dolly thing, and all these big boxes stacked up that I had to then put together. But I'm curious to know when that professor didn't think this unnamed VisiCalc was a good idea. What did you see as it being a good idea?
Well, it's interesting. I just had a sense of the market. So at that point, I had a company called Personal Software. Later, that company got renamed VisiCorp because VisiCalc became such a prominent product, and we had other we had VisiPlot and VisiWord and other things too. But I was in touch with the market because at the beginning we were selling first some relatively straightforward tools, and our best-selling product was actually a chess-playing program called MicroChess by Peter Jennings, who was really my very early partner in Personal Software. And we were in touch with a lot of people in computer stores, and people were thinking personal computers, home computers. That was the notion. But when you actually talk to people about who was buying these things, it was business people. Mm-hmm. It was people buying it for a business purpose, and at least I had the insight, fortunately, to recognize that this idea of a full screen tool like a word processor but for numbers would really work, that that people would be able to use it. Yeah. We had a lot of interesting talks, the three of us, at this time. Most of them were in Bob Frankston's attic in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we debated things. So because we all were computer science graduates and we had a sense about software design, there were a lot of things that came out in the initial VisiCalc that were deliberate. They were not just lucky or accidental. For example, A1 notation was something that came out in the very first Apple II VisiCalc, but we had considered several alternatives, including R1C1, what Microsoft later tried to do with R1C1 notation, and the ability, there was actually a prototype of VisiCalc where you could type into the column headers and the row headers and type in your labels, which would have been interesting if we had done that. But and I would credit Dan with this, that what we were really doing was defining a namespace, a way for people to have a familiar way to address where the formulas were and where the results appeared, and a stable namespace turned out to be a good idea. Turned out to be an important idea. And there are a whole lot of other things. I mean, in many ways, it's striking how similar today's spreadsheets are to the original Apple II VisiCalc. You know, I mean, there's graphics. It's a graphical tool, and it's much better now. And there's much richer database facilities. That really started with Lotus 123 and got a lot richer with Excel, and then a whole lot richer with Power Pivot and Power Query that we have today. But a lot of the ideas, you know, are still what we had back then.
Wow.
Wow.
So how does it feel that we're like your three of your millions of sons?
I'll tell you, there is a downside to having a Wikipedia page and to having like thousands and thousands of references over the web. I mean, I will tell people, you know, yeah, you can find out a lot about me on the web, and some of it is true.
Some of it.
And a lot of it isn't, you know, so... I think there's also a Facebook page. I've never joined Facebook. I'm almost like under protest on Facebook. But apparently there's a Facebook page that they created about me that I can't change. You know, I have no role in creating it or changing it.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's an upside and downside.
Gotcha.
So what were the faces like when you first showed this to? I mean, I assume when you guys created this project, were you thinking this is going to be big in finance, this is going to be big in engineering? Did you think that it was going to have a narrow band or that it was going to have a broad band? And also, what were in the sessions? What were the model where you have to do it all over here? Look, you could just do this and it will update in 1 second. You can run tons of different scenarios now, quickly.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because we literally, I can remember us in over a period of months, really, talking this over, and we would wax and wane in our own enthusiasm. We would literally go from, you know, everyone can use this. You know, if you have a huge market, you know, the kind of thing you should never really say in a startup because it's usually unrealistic. But we were, you know, we would go in periods of enthusiasm. We would say, you know, everyone can use this. I mean, small businesses, large businesses, finance can use it, HR can use it, people can use it for their checkbooks, you know, and so on. And then we would, at other times, we'd be really pessimistic and say, you know, it's too abstract. People won't get it. You know, people have to build their own models. They won't be able to. You know, it's not actually super good for any one thing. It won't have any market at all. You know, we'll never get anywhere. And so we just had the faith that you have to have when you're entrepreneurs to get it going. I will tell you that the first time I showed VisiCalc to the people at Apple, I remember sitting in a room with Mike Markkula, who was the first president of Apple Computer. I think Steve Jobs was either in that same session or not. And I showed them an example in VisiCalc that Bob Frankson had done, I think, of a checkbook balancing program. And Mike Markkula's first reaction was, "Oh, that's nice. It's a checkbook balancing program." You know, that's all they thought it was, and they thought that was nice, but, you know, I think they also had another checkbook balancing program in AppleSoft Basic or something.
Wow.
But, you know, they did get it. I mean, eventually they realized that it was really multi-purpose and you could do a lot. I will tell you that by the time we were off giving demos to Apple's dealers, which we would do, I would go out to the regional Apple distributor meetings, and there we might have even 100 or even more, maybe 200 dealers in attendance. And at that time, by the way, projection TV screens were very rare. But these guys, these distributors, had one, you know. Mm-hmm. So we were able to demo VisiCalc on a big screen, and we would demo it to oohs and ahs. I mean, it was like, you know, just putting something up and then playing what if and changing the numbers. And it was so slow at that time that you would actually see this ripple effect where the numbers would slowly change across the screen. But it all seemed very fast, and people were amazed. And so we knew, and the Apple people too, knew we were on the right track when we were getting that kind of reaction.
You know, so it's interesting to me because after the past BAC conference a couple weeks ago, you know, I was really sensing a need for empowerment. You know, the people who don't get data, the people who don't understand SQL, and never will, because their job is, call center supervisor. How can you empower them around data? And
Yeah.
that's what I'm hearing from you is, was the other person might have been in a world of the professionals, and the professionals got it. But what about the people who do need to be empowered? And my friend Leslie, who was running a Girl Scout troop and managing merit badges. That seems like what you are allowed to have happen, to where she could get off of index cards and trying to remember.
Yeah, but it actually goes up and down the company size. That is, there are lots of business analysts typically in large companies and in middle-sized companies and in smaller companies who all were kind of empowered by the spreadsheet. And I've heard that one of the most rewarding things really about having been in my position is I will run into people all the time who will, who will realize the role that I played, and then they'll say, that changed my life, or that changed my career for the better, fortunately. Mm-hmm. And because I was recognized as being able to do something in my company and got promoted, and then I went off and started my own company, and I became, I was a successful consultant, and there are a lot of stories like this of people even making career changes because they discovered what they could do.
And I'll bet you that there's somebody saying it sucked for them. Because like I'm talking with a divorce attorney, and how they need to bring all this data about the other side to see if the other side has money or not, that anything they're hiding. So now you can bring all that stuff together and you say, oh, God. No, it should have been months before they found that money I was hiding.
Damn you did, Fylstra.
Pool table. Oh.
No, wait, that's not me. That's the NSA. Actually, that is technology, and kind of another topic of privacy and, ubiquitous means, whether it's over the internet like this or, cameras everywhere. A lot of people say, I'm not really the expert on this, but a lot of people say privacy has gone away, get used to it, chill out. And that's unfortunately probably true.
Well, because I wonder about some things, particularly about, my first experience with Windows 8.1 was just a few weeks ago. And to log into 8.1, I've got to log into Windows. It just feels like, why don't I just cut the front of my house open and let people see me sitting on the toilet and eating and talking on the phone with my mother? Let's just go ahead and get it over with.
I hear you. Talk to Microsoft about that. They want to know your identity for lots of reasons. There are advantages too.
Sure.
Doing what we're doing now would be hard if we didn't, have a easy way to know your identity, on Google Plus and Google Hangouts here.
Sure.
But I would say one other thing, about that. So one thing that's happening for us is that we have these analytics tools, and for a long time that's been kind of an interesting niche, but now it's getting to be a very exciting time because there's so much data, and whether it's big data or just streams and streams of ordinary sized data, the availability of that data is causing people to get more and more interested in analytics. But I also think the big boys, if you will, or the big players, have had the computing power and expertise to take advantage of data for a fairly long time. What's changing is that, whether it's companies at levels within the company where you're doing work within a department or group, or all the way down to the individual business analyst, it's now becoming possible for those people to kind of do the same thing on an equal footing with the big boys. In other words, everyone is going to be empowered to be able to analyze a lot of data. You can do powerful data mining in Excel. You can do the kinds of things. So you don't have to be able to program in R or Python, and you don't have to be a data scientist or a PhD, and you don't actually have to. I mean, there are a bunch of good new masters in analytics programs for somebody who's got the 1 or 2 years and the money to take one of those programs. I'm all for it. But if you don't have that time and you've got to get results now or get results this month or next month, you can. I mean, it is possible, and Excel is an amazingly good tool for doing that.
Yes, it
I think
is.
that parlays pretty nicely actually to our topic of the week. So I'm going to pass this over to you, Jordan, because I'm interested in you expanding upon that. So Jordan, would you mind kicking us off with the topic of the week?
Sure. So our topic of the week is what we would call impressive Excel, and what we want to talk about is, first of all, things that impressed us at the most recently at the past Business Analytics Conference, but also over the years, with our guests from an evolutionary standpoint. What are things that we've seen that have impressed us? What have clients done that have impressed us? What things have we conquered with Excel that we didn't think was possible? So, yeah, I'll just give it to the floor. Anyone want to jump in and give their thoughts?
Sure,
How about you, Oz? What do you think? Oh,
No,
sorry.
no.
How about you, Rick?
Yeah, I'll start off. Just kind of being in the BI space and seeing how things have evolved over time. It's gone from you're either in Excel or you're in a reporting tool. You're in Crystal Reports or something like that. And something I've seen kind of evolve over the last several years is many of the major kind of ERP providers or system providers creating add-ins to Excel or add-ins to Office, right, to where you can connect directly to SAP, connect directly to Oracle, or any of your systems you're using to run your business, and connect directly to those with Excel, and use almost like a pivot table for the most part, bringing your data in, just sliding it over. The fact that I think that a lot of major BI players are starting to see Excel not necessarily as competition, but as a ad hoc tool. And if they can kind of get their hands around that market and those people who are using that tool already, they're more likely to have their business intelligence tools. People are more likely to use them because they're in a tool they're already comfortable with. So that's something that's really evolved for me that I've seen even in the business intelligence space, quite a bit.
Yeah. One thing I think about is one of my first real serious projects as a freelancer was a client, Sarah. She was moving like 400 phone systems. These offices, these kiosks and things, they were moving their phone systems. And they just had to get on with the get on, and start moving that stuff. And there was no time to start thinking about a database and whatnot. And so there was like 400 rows of data and about 200 columns. And we just had to ride that bull. And sure, you could make an argument for it should have been in a database, there should have been this and that, but they had to get moving. And so I was brought in to make a dashboard and help clean at night, when she would pass me the spreadsheet at about 10 p.m. and I had to have it back to her by 10 a.m. Deal with any enhancements she's wanted, any changes to the dashboard, any broken formulas. That was a great project, one of my favorite clients. And that one interesting thing, as a freelancer, when I jumped in there, they were on Excel 2007. And there was some cool things that would have been available had they been in 2010, but I had to realize they don't have much space, so I've just got to deal with what they've got so we can keep moving and meet this. They had like a mid-November deadline. That was a really exciting project, and yeah, and they moved all those 400 phone systems.
Cool. Well, I think what's really impressing me now is the Power BI stuff, and I know we always talk about that and how quickly it can analyze data. But I just want to make this point. So if you guys, if our viewers ever go to archive.org, they can actually see older programs. So I'm going to share my screen real quick because they have the original. I think it's the original. Daniel can tell me if it's the original, but they do have VisiCalc here at archive.org, and you see it opens with, do you want to use 80 columns? So I'm not really sure what the lore is behind that, about the 80 columns. Did it open? Could you choose to do more? Or, but as you can see, it's grown significantly since since the early days.
Yeah, I can't even remember the size limits in the original VisiCalc. They were pretty small. The whole screen. See, we didn't have an 80-column screen at first. We had a 40-column screen, 40 by 25, and it was a great pleasure when we were able to expand to 80 by 25. I know Oz was talking about it being Excel 2007, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this, but to me, you know, in Excel 2010 and Excel 2013, the availability of Power Pivot, I think, was almost like a new era for Excel. You know, it really gave you the immense power to deal with, you know, 10 million or even 100 million rows in the spreadsheet data model. And then with Power Pivot and now Power Query and Power View, that really it's meant a lot actually for analytics applications, because we would compete against, you know, software from like SAS and IBM and others where, you know, the message was, well, Excel is nice for smaller problems, but what about big problems? You know, then now you need our software. You know, you need to move outside of a spreadsheet. And really, with Power Pivot and Power Query, you can solve models that are extremely large, driven by extremely large amounts of data in Excel. It really is a fully competitive stack to what you can get from other vendors. Excuse me one second. There are a couple applications. You were kind of asking what has been most impressive to me, and I can think of two. One is a business user who built a model. This is using our more powerful solvers for Excel, but it had, so in standard Excel, you can solve models up to just 200 decision variables, and that excuse me again. Let's see.
That's for you too. It's not for you to hit that bourbon.
Yeah. That's
I know sometimes
you.
talking about Excel gets me really
Parched.
too. It does, because you want to keep talking about it.
So testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, voices come back. So we have a user who built a model in Excel that people felt couldn't be built, and it had, so where the standard solver would be limited to 200 decision variables, this person had a model with 2.4 million decision variables, all done in Excel, and I forget exactly how many constraints, but you know, that kind of problem could be solved, you know, and it's the kind of problem you would find in far more expensive software that might cost you 20 times as much. The other, on a completely different axis, the kind of problem that that has impressed me is the kinds of problems people have solved, and they've been all over the map. I mean, one person had a solver model that was for like a Formula race car, and it was a model of the acceleration for the engine and when you should shift and all that sort of thing. But one of my favorites was a model from somebody at the FDA actually, and they were figuring out how to optimally allocate funds for AIDS research across different projects and regions and so on using Excel.
Wow.
So, you know, a lot of good has been done.
Yes, a lot of good. And it's possible because people are empowered.
That's very true.
What sort of things did you see, Jordan?
You know, there's just so it's really the Power BI stuff that's impressed me lately. I would say the big jump for me in my career that really made a big difference because I was working at the Air Force Audit Agency at that point, and all their macros were written in 2003, and they had upgraded 2007. The like toolbar didn't look very good, so I went in and I like redid the ribbon, and I actually like made my own designs, and I created this toolbar, and it wasn't even that hard to do it. And this really like was a career changer for me. I created this toolbar and I started making kind of custom things for people, and I collected them into this toolbar, and then it started spreading around the agency, and suddenly I had folks calling me from across the country and across the world asking like how to use it and how I did it, and by the time I left, it was the standard toolbar across the agency. It was like 800 some people were using it, so that was the biggest change, and I don't think I could have done that with 2003. I know that sounds weird to say, but 2007 was new enough, and I was interested enough in it that it like really created this great moment for the work I was doing. You know, because before that I really didn't care about Excel. I know that sounds weird, but I had done Excel courses in like high school, and you know, it just was like, I mean, I was all right at it, but we didn't really learn it well enough. And I guess the thing later was using Solver Excel, which when I worked at the Air Force Institute of Technology, that kind of changed. I didn't know that such hard problems. First, I didn't know that they really existed because I didn't have an operations research background at that point. But I didn't even know that they could be solved like that. So that was learning how to use Solver, and that was. And I'm not just saying that because you're on, but that was kind of a game changer for a lot of the projects, because at the time people at AFIT were saying, that's the Air Force Institute of Technology, they were saying we need to use C# for this, or we need to use Java, or we need to use C++, and that's a problem for the Air Force because then you make an application, the application has to be approved. So we liked making things in Excel and being able to do these complex linear optimizations in Excel, you know, doing scheduling problems. I don't know. There's tons of problems you could do. Sky's the limit. So doing all these in Excel was really a game changer for my career, and also showing what we could do for the Air Force. So, yeah.
But see,
those are the things that impressed me.
So I'm curious of what Dan would have to say about this, because big data is starting to bore me, because I keep coming across people who don't have their normal data straightened out. And that, I think, is where our lives are really impacted, where the nonprofit that can't apply for grants, you know, the retail establishment that can't get their scheduling right, whatever, a lot of just regular stuff. We aren't talking about the hospital that takes days to download billions of rows of data. And I've been more concerned about data literacy and having people think about, okay, so you are the grant writer, you are the shift manager at this small hotel. How can you get more out of Excel? How can you think more about data so things don't turn sideways on you?
Well, I think starting with the fundamentals is always, you know, probably the right thing for people. It's really true that, I mean, there's a great deal of hype about big data now, and actually Frontline is working in the big data domain right now, but an awful lot of companies actually have large data that's not really big data. So what, you know, definition of terms to me, big data means data that is so voluminous that you really can't hold it on one computer, even one powerful computer, or one database, even an Oracle or DB2 or SQL Server large database, even Amazon Redshift. And so most of the technology around big data is centered around distributing that data, just storing it on like a cluster of 100 or 200 or even 1,000 machines, and then the software tools that will enable you to do something with that data, you know, by executing operations across the cluster at once. Well, I think most even large companies, with the exception of just the biggest companies on earth, their financial data is not big data.
Right.
It'll fit in a database.
Yes.
maybe they're, everything that happens in terms of, hits on their website, or, the Twitter feed across the industries that they care about, or that sort of thing, or, video or GPS feeds of people walking in front of their retail stores, that sort of thing would be big data. And so there's hype, there's substance behind the hype for
Yes.
certain kinds of applications. And we actually plan to bring big data into Excel.
Okay.
And make it possible to do interesting things with sampling and summarization from a cluster in Excel. But for most people, Power Pivot and Power Query will do what you need. And you can pull that data. Typically, you're going to build. Certainly, we see analytic models being built from data that often shows up in pivot tables because it's summarized data that came from the detailed data that you might have in your SQL Server database or in your spreadsheet data model. And there's just all kinds of not yet tapped opportunities there. So thinking about data, I'd almost just want to encourage people. So we have a product called Excel Miner. You could try that, or you could try something else. But play with data. I mean, that's really the thing to do. Like, start out by looking at it. And that's where data visualization comes in. I think most people feel now that's a really important trend right now. Whether you use Excel charts, whether you use Power View, Power BI, beautiful tool for that, whether you use Tableau or ClickView or something, start by looking at your data. You get a lot of insights that way.
Yes.
And then that's a guide to applying like data mining methods where you can get a lot more machine learning methods.
Play with it. Play with it. Don't be scared of your data.
Right.
Yes.
Whatever you do, make sure you Rick Grantham always plays with data.
Hey, yeah, plays with data. Yeah.
So with that, Oz, would you mind kicking us off with the tip section?
All right. Hot tips. And Jordan has a tip for you that's going to have you grab your milkshake. All right.
This tip really is this. This is a tip almost. It's more about me than it is about about the tip. Let me get set up real quick because I'm going to put this on my secondary monitor so I can talk and it's not distracting. Okay, so this is actually a really easy tip, and I'm almost embarrassed to say that I never even thought about this before. Okay, so I have two procedures, and the truth is, a lot of you probably already know this, and you think that someone who does so much VBA, I feel sometimes I'm so immersed in it, there's so many things that I miss, and it's funny that you miss things over time because you sort of what you're doing, and you don't realize that there's sometimes an easier way, and that perhaps is even the broader tip besides this tip that I'm about to give you. But here I have a procedure. Here I am, and I put this down in a module, which is not something I generally do. If you've read my books, I don't really like doing that, but here we're going to do it for the sake of example. So if I wanted to figure out where this here I am was defined, I did this painstakingly terrible way of looking for it, which is to say I would hit Control F and I would take this bit of text and I would find it until I could find the definition. So I'd look for maybe sub right before it. But really, all you need to do is just right-click it, and then you can go to definition, and here it is. I mean, that's just so easy. And this is, I'm talking about years. I've been doing this the terrible, slow Control F way. So that's my tip. But as I said, the broader lesson here is, just because you've been doing for so many years, you remember that sometimes the stuff you do is force a habit. Really look to what you're doing and see if there's an easier way. Be open to that. So I don't know if that counts as 2 tips, Oz, but I imagine you'll just judge my VBA tip. So what do you think?
Something. There's a 5 sriracha tip because we have to continue to expand and learn more and get out of habits. But we got to see how we can do things better, smarter. And an example is, say, when all I knew was if statements and some. But I had this 3-day process where everything was right, though. But it took 3 days. By learning about VLOOKUPs and pivot tables and conditional formatting, those 3 days were reduced down to just a few hours by being open to getting out of the habit and looking for better ways. So, yeah, 5 srirachas for that one.
Thanks.
I have a tip as well.
Huh? All right.
I have a tip as well.
Whoop it on.
So here's the scenario, right? You run a small business, and you find that in running a small business, you're constantly reacting to the data, right? Every time you think there's too many calls, you're reacting to it. You're calling a meeting in and everything else. So what I want to walk you through is it's some Excel work, it's minimal stats work, but really more of the thought process that you should go through when you're looking at your data to determine when you should react and when things are just part of normal variation. Okay, so let's walk through that. Walk through kind of standard deviations and how you can pay attention to things that are the most important.
And I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to tell you people who are paying attention, the thought process. That's the big process to get your data literacy. All right.
Okay, I trust you can see my screen.
We can.
Could be a little bigger.
Okay. So here's the scenario, right? You have a whole bunch of data here. You have all of your dates here. And let's see if I can make this view a little bit bigger. Help Oz out a little bit. Okay, how about that? Is that good?
Yes, that's wonderful.
So you have just a number of dates, and I just put in some dummy data here, and just to be able to get a series of dummy data for all these different days, I just put in kind of a normal distribution curve, and that normal distribution curve, I say, give me a random number with the mean is 500 and the standard deviation is 30. Now, the only point of doing this is just so I can get some random data, right? Random data that is in a normal Bell kind of distribution curve. But I could very well at this point just say copy, paste special, and just do values and just get the data here. But the point is this is just some dummy data. So the question is then, how do you set up alerts so that you're only paying attention to 594 here, but not paying attention to 498? So that you're only paying attention to the things in this column that are, that are falling outside of what would be normally expected. So let's walk through the setup on this. So I'm going to unhide some columns here. Let's unhide this. So we're going to walk through first off how you calculate the mean. Here I've just taken the average of everything that's in this column here, column C, and it's very close to 500, which shouldn't surprise you, right? Because we said in our distribution here we wanted a mean of 500 and a standard deviation of 30. So here's where the magic starts to happen. It's standing up one standard deviation. So one standard deviation usually accounts for almost 70% of most data points in a normal distribution. So in this case, the way you set this up, you say standard STDEV, standard deviation, and you're grabbing your data points. And it's telling you what the standard deviation of that is. So in many instances, you could say you want 1 standard deviation, 2 or 3. And in many instances, 3 standard deviation gets you to close to 99-ish% of all data points. So at that point, you're really reacting to just 1%. So what we're doing here is we're just taking that 1 standard deviation and multiplying that times 3. Now, here's how you handle kind of the upper and lower control limits. So you want to react whenever things are too high, an upper control limit, or when things are too low, a lower control limit. Right? So in this instance, what we're doing is we're taking G3 plus G5, or your mean, times or plus your standard deviations, and saying this is 592. Your lower control limit is 405. So somewhere between 400 and 592-ish would be kind of what we would expect in a normal process, and things outside of that would be kind of special cause. So let's talk about how you would set up your alerts here. We could have done some color coding, but we didn't. So what is this? We're saying that if this number over here to the left, if it is less than your lower control limit, then give me an alert. And if it's greater than your upper control limit, give me an alert. Else, just give me a null value. what that means is now we're starting to kind of understand when there are things we should pay attention to and when there are things we shouldn't pay attention to. And since I do have this as a random number here, we can see how that all changes, as we update the random variable. So let's pull this back to me real quick and walk through some of the thinking here. One moment.
This is good stuff.
Okay, so think about this as being, you have your normal bell curve, right? And as you get kind of 1 standard deviation, 2, 3 out, as you get 3 out, you're kind of messing with the tails at this point of your kind of a standard curve, assuming you have normal data. But when you're looking at control limits, if you think about your control charts, and control charts are like, Six Sigma or any sort of process engineering, where you'd have kind of an upper and lower, and you have those kind of charts that tells you when you're supposed to pay attention to stuff. Really, all that is taking your bell curve and your 3 standard deviations and cutting that all over on its side and putting that bell curve over on its side, right? And at that point, you're seeing most of the data is in the middle. However, some things fall out of upper or lower control limits. And so that's just one way, and you could tighten that up and say, I want 2 standard deviations, et cetera. So there's a lot of ways to end up playing with that, but that's one of the ways that you can use Excel every day. You can use spreadsheets to actually help you better manage your business.
Now I'm curious. Now see, okay, I'm gonna cut to it, and I'm gonna say, this is just 5. This is way outside of 5 because the thought process and also the doing of it. But can you tell me what would be an example of where this would matter?
Sure. So think about, you talked about a call center a little bit earlier in the show. Imagine when you should, when you need to be concerned that you're getting too many calls, or not enough calls. Imagine, Mr. Fylstra there is in the software business, and he may be concerned about whenever, he's getting too many returns. When are you just getting, whenever you're getting too many returns or not enough returns out? That's probably a bad example. That's a bad example. Yeah, but there are certain things where people freak out, where they say, okay, well, I got 3 returns today. Oh, that's horrible. I had a really bad month. And I had a certain number of returns, when really that's just kind of part of the normal variation, And it's really, when are you reacting to something that's really important, and when are you just reacting to react? Man, don't waste your time. Don't waste your time reacting to things that are important.
Don't. Man, you have me thinking 2 things. One is somebody I've talked with who says that they write off a lot of bills because people file bankruptcy. Now, what if they could use something like this to get a sense of maybe a number of late payments is an indicator of this person is on a path to filing bankruptcy? We got to do something before they get there. I don't know.
Yeah. So part of my background was doing
a thing of weird stuff.
Yeah, part of my background was doing exactly what you just said for a credit card company and kind of determining what that is. And they don't necessarily use statistical process control too much for that. That's what you're really talking about is more prediction. So they'll get into some higher level data mining sort of algorithms on that, whether that be chi-squared, shade, any sort of neural networks, decision trees. And so it gets a little bit more complicated once you get into that. But just... at that point, you're trying to change the process, right? You're trying to get better predictions so that you can change the inputs. And all I'm talking about is once you have a process, once that process is already in place, let's determine whether or not your next data point is in control or not. And this is just a matter of which you can do that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking too about, in decision theory, there's, say, your vividness heuristic and your framing heuristic, and how you can get sucked into thinking reality is one thing just because there were a few vivid instances that stick with you. But if you can just step back into data and empower yourself with Excel.
So I can try a tip, I guess.
All right.
All right. Time for this?
Yeah.
I'm going to try to do screen sharing here. We'll see if this works.
Whoop it on us.
Let's see. Yeah, okay, here's start screen share. So if this works, this is just Excel 2010, and I think I'm bringing this up because I think a lot of people don't know they have it. I think most people know they have Solver in Excel. It should be on the Data tab in the Analysis group like this. If it's not there, you can. It's still installed, and you can just turn it on from the File menu, and that would be Options in Excel 2010. But there's also a example workbook that ships with Excel. It's been there in all the releases. It's there in Excel 2007, 2010, 2013. And you get to it by going to File, Open, and then wherever your Excel, program is installed, Program Files, this is 32-bit Excel, so Program Files, x86, Microsoft Office, Office Version, Samples. In that folder, you should find this little worksheet, SolveSamp. And there are half a dozen or so simple examples using Solver, and you can just bring them up and solve them in place here. There's a solver dialog coming up. This particular one is going to, when I click solve, it's going to find the optimal number of products to manufacture out of these parts, such that you're maximizing profit while not exceeding all the inventory that you have on hand, and so on. You've got a transportation model here. This is an extremely common problem that affects a lot of businesses. There's a staff scheduling problem here, which would apply not only, this is an amusement park example, but there are hospitals, call centers, there's staffing problem, and so on. So this is a kind of a place to start. This is a financial planning model where you're just trying to allocate funds in a company to earn the maximum interest, allocate them to CDs of different durations, and so on. This one's actually a stock portfolio optimization example. And all these things are just there in Excel. So I would just encourage people to take a look and go and use them. And let me say one more thing, that we were just talking about those things that sounded like kind of exotic with decision trees and neural networks and all that. You can do all that. You can do all that in Excel.
Oh, man.
There are classification trees and regression trees and neural networks and the whole thing. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Give it a try.
Don't fear the spreadsheet. Don't fear the spreadsheet.
Just fall in. Surrender to it. I'm curious about when you say, let's pick an example of when you say staffing problems. What kind of problems?
Are you asking, Oz, are you asking about that particular problem, or what kind of problems generally can you tackle with Solver?
Generally, what would Solver be used for, given and thinking about a staffing issue?
Okay, so what's happening in that model that I was showing is it's an amusement park, and they have fluctuating demand to cover the ride. So they need a certain number of employees to operate all the attractions, and depending on the day of the week, in this example, they have more or less traffic, more or less people in the park. And so the problem then is having enough people to cover, the weekends, the busiest days of the week. And then the issue is employees generally would like to work a schedule that's 5 days on and 2 days off. And so the question then is, how do you allocate people to, if you think about it, well, if I bring this back, I would have to share it again.
We're sharing it the entire time, so.
Okay, great. Then let's go back to the staff scheduling example. If you think about it, if employees want to work 5 days on and 2 days off, there's 7 possible schedules that people could do that, and these are the days off they would take: Sunday, Monday, Monday, Tuesday, and so on. So what this model does, and then down here is the demand. How many employees do we need on each day of the week? And so then the problem is we're going to try to minimize payroll cost while satisfying demand, having enough employees on each day of the week, by figuring out how many people we can put on each schedule. I think it may already be showing the optimal solution. Let's just go ahead and solve it again. Here we're using integer variables for the number of employees, so we don't have a fractional number of people. And okay, so it's coming up with a better solution here. So we've reduced our payroll cost by simply rearranging, the people, and that allowed us to cover. See, each of these numbers is bigger than or equal to the demand, and but everybody's on a 5 day on 2 day off schedule. The general idea behind solver models. See, how do I stop sharing here?
You should be able to hit escape, or if you just jump
Okay,
back
yes.
to your browser, there's a button.
Did this work? It's still.
If you can try just jumping back to your browser, and then there's a
Yeah.
stop.
And I don't see any.
Stop sharing.
Yeah, I'm not seeing
Well,
any
if you
stop
don't see
sharing.
that, you can drag your mouse over to the left side. There's that screen, and hit that screen share button again, and it'll just flip you back.
Okay. How are we now?
We still see you.
I'm still seeing
So it's good if you. No, we still see Excel, don't you?
Right.
Oh yeah, I should say we still see Excel.
Not sure how to turn this off because all I see is.
Are you able to do kind of Alt-Tab and go to your browser?
Let's see. Well, that's Excel. That's Excel.
Right.
This is the browser.
Right. So the browser, you're just showing the Excel. You're not showing your desktop. So as you might recall.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, what's missing is a way to stop sharing.
Well, try
Sorry,
exiting
folks.
Excel. You know that might work.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of workbooks open, so let's see how long this takes.
But Oz, just another example of a problem that we use it for was
Okay.
we had there was a aircraft carrier, and there's only a certain amount of space on it, and everything has a different shape. How can we pack that all in and make sure that everything, that the optimal amount of space, given all the shape of the different objects, is being used correctly? So how do you get the most on? Some things it's not even just about space, because some things, when you transport them, you can sell them, let's say, and so that's worth more, right? Having that on versus a smaller item. So where is that balance? What do you want to optimize? If you want to optimize, how much, minimize the amount of the payload. Do you want to optimize the money you can make? Do you want to do both and see if there's something that you can do with that? So those are the kind of problems you can do with it.
Okay. Okay. And and one thing that I've wondered about is this shift example. What if you could say put the weather in and know that it's going to be raining, 2 days next week?
Well, they don't even know that.
Well, no, you look at the weather.
No, I know. I'm just joking.
Hmm?
Joking. No, I'm just making fun of how they always mess that stuff up.
So, Oz, what is your Sriracha ranking on that?
I have to give that another 5 because Solver, we should dig into that. And I'm glad, Rick, that you led off by talking about the thought process, because we got to think more. We have to really dig into the thought process and get that clear before we can even address the tools and seeing what we can get out of that. So giving that a 5 because that is really something that you have to think about. And it's available to you in Excel, and it can start to give you access to whatever you want to call big data.
Thank you for that, Oz. So, so what's up? So let's walk through some of the news that's happening in your neck of the woods.
In my neck of the woods?
No, that was just generic. I'm doing my share screen. That was a dramatic pause.
Oh, we gotta get Dan back.
You talking to me, Rick?
No, I'm wondering what Dan is.
So I'm here. Excel is completely closed, but
Right.
I'm still not sure that it's it's showing what it should show.
No. And on Google Hangout, there would be on the left side that flyout pane should come out, and then you click the screen share.
Yep.
And then it should bring up another window that says stop sharing.
Yep, I know.
Let's
It's not happening.
move back to
I'll tell you what. We'll come back to that. We may have to just record your news section later. That's fine. We'll make sure that everyone gets to know about it.
That's it. So let's move on. So news of the week, and it's been gosh, a month, 4 weeks since the last time we've had a show. So there's a lot to catch up on. First thing to bring to your attention is powerquery.training. So come over here to powerquery.training, and hey, this is some guys over here that you might be familiar with. Let's go over to the About Us page. And this is Ken Poles, who was on one of our shows a little bit earlier in the season. Ken Poles, Excel MVP, and Miguel Escobar here. You know, these guys are now, you can go ahead and get your Power Query training over here through them. So that's at powerquery.training. Go ahead and check that out. We were talking a lot about the new Power BI stuff, and here's a place where you can learn some more about it. Next up, Microsoft Power BI is in preview. Which means you give them your email address, and you can come in and start to take a look at what Power BI looks like. So that is at powerbi.com. And if you're interested in a little bit of a preview in that, you can go over to excelcampus.com. Our good friend who was on the show at one time, John Akampora, Excel MVP, does an overview of Power BI and the Power BI designers. You can go down here. He's got a pretty lengthy blog post on this, which kind of talks about just about everything about it. So go take a look at this over at excelcampus.com. Also want to bring your attention to a book that came out recently by another Excel MVP, Tom Urtis. You ever want to learn VBA? Got 24 hours? Cram it into a weekend? The Excel VBA 24-hour trainer is released here in the last several weeks by Excel MVP Tom Urtis. Two more things to bring to your attention. Again, it's been a month. So we do have the first reports coming out of the Amsterdam Excel Summit. Over at excelunplugged.com, you know, one of the guys who went to the summit gives a report on all the different things he saw. You know, all the Excel-lebrities, did I say that right? And gives you an idea of all what happened. There's Ken Poles right there. We just talked about him and on the training site. You know, it's just John Peltier was there, and it just talks about everything that went on at that conference. So go check that out as well. You can get a report there. And the last thing to bring to your attention from me is contextures. Now, we only do 20 episodes a year, and usually 2 or 3 of those are you know, live shows from a conference or something like that. So, you know, maybe you're getting news from us 17, 18 times a year. But if you need your news a little bit more frequently, go over to the Contextures blog. And in the Contextures blog, go to the Excel Roundup. And in the Excel Roundup, again, this came out just a few days ago, you know, she does usually about 10 or so points of things you need to pay attention to, things that are happening in the Excel community. This is maintained by Deborah Dalgleish, an Excel MVP, I believe, out of Canada. So go over there to the Contextures blog and check this out. Stop sharing real quick. And that's it for me. I believe, Oz, you had some news as well.
All right, I'll just share something fun and simple. Where am I at? Oh yeah, check out this video by Clint Tuttle, and he does some songs around data. I understand he's a professor. That's a lot of fun, So check that out, and I am going to stop sharing here.
You already have.
All right, cool.
And now is Excel Funk.
Excel Funk, FUNC. Funk.
Yeah,
Cool.
Functions, FUNC functions, Excel functions. So you see, there's just something going on because you got so much Excel brain power in Ohio, and you had all that funk coming out of Ohio, functions. There's something going on there that I got to find out about. But anyway, and a bit of news that I'll say a little bit more later is that I'm going to be teaching a 5-hour workshop at the AMP nonprofit conference at Portland State University in July. But tell you about that later.
And you, Jordan?
Yeah, I actually have this news from friend of the show, Sylvia Uhas. She sent me a press release over my phone. It says, Excel TV press release. I guess we have press releases now.
But you're not sharing your screen,
still,
Jordan. I just see a
no,
black
I'm
screen.
not. This is on my phone. So there's nothing to share. She says, Excel is now co-authoring Mr. Excel's Excel 40 Greatest Excel Tips of All Time book. So you remember that was the book that we all helped crowdsource and crowdfund. She is a co-author on that, so she's going to write it. And here's the thing that's really cool, and I wish I had some media for this. She's going to have some pretty soon here. She's going to have a cocktail book with it. There's going to be a recipe cocktail book called The Excel Lover's Guide to Cocktails, and that's a bonus book alongside the Excel 40 book that's coming out by Bill. And there's a collector's series coming out in September 2015, just in time for Excel's 30th birthday. Now, here's the cool thing. And Sylvia, I don't think has...
Jordan, your camera's turned off.
Sorry?
Your camera is turned off.
My camera's turned off.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I can see all of you. I'm sure. Google Hangouts is recording this, even if my camera's turned off. It shows it on my lower screen. But in either case, she has made a series of drinks that are very hilarious and funny. I don't want to spill them yet. That wasn't meant to be a pun, but I don't want to give it. We'll let her do that. But this is very exciting and very cool. You can make Excel cocktail drinks for your friends and family and your enemies if you'd like. So that's all I have, Rick.
Okay. Sounds great. So, so thanks for that. And also, I would encourage all of you to go over to solver.com. Again, go over to solver.com. There's a series of webinars that are coming up that you can sign up for. And so, we'll put all of those in the links as well. And we'll record a bit of news also from Dan Fylstra about what's happening over on solver.com.
So can you, if I'm still available on audio, I think I can't seem to. Google probably still thinks I'm screen sharing when I am not, and and there's no way to change that. But
I wondered if what if we were to try to have you go off and then you come back on?
We can try that in a second. But let me just share a kind of a fun thing that people could look up. It's about Excel. This is if you just Google on Simon Says Risk Solver. Simon Says Risk Solver. There is a YouTube video online that this is the Simon School of Business, I think, at the University of Rochester, and it's hilarious. It's all about these MBA students using Excel and being stumped by problems, and then they start figuring out how to solve a problem using this Monte Carlo simulation adding called Risk Solver, and the whole thing is done to the Ghostbusters theme, and they actually dress up as the Ghostbusters, and they sort of repurpose these vacuum cleaner things and so on, and go around cleaning up the school, and they have a great theme song and everything. It's really hilarious, really worth seeing.
Wow, cool.
So just search for Simon Says Risk Solver.
Okay.
Will do.
Hang on one second. Google finally came up and showed me.
There you are.
You are. It says finally. You are saving, and now I can stop it.
Right.
Stop it.
Right. We were on a path straight to hell, and now we've turned it around.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are running a webinar on Thursday, and let's see. I don't think I want to try screen sharing again to show that, but we have a let's see. There's not a great way to sign up for it except to know how to go to GoToWebinar and get it. Jordan and Rick do have the link. If we could, if there's some way of sharing that, that would be nice.
Definitely, we can do that.
I wanted to ask you about when we were talking about Excel Online before we went on the air. Can you say some more about Excel Online and some of the apps that you're planning?
Yeah, so I think for everyone, it's a real good idea to start playing around with Excel Online. There is everyone's probably familiar with Excel add-ins and VBA. There's kind of a new generation of enhancements to Excel that are called apps, and they're developed in JavaScript with HTML and CSS and JavaScript. Usually you end up hosting your apps on a website. Most of us are using Azure websites for that. And so Excel Online, it's not as powerful as desktop Excel, but it will do 90% of what you need. And even if your company is not currently using Excel 2013, even if you're using Excel 2010 or Excel 2007, you can even sign up for a free trial of Office 365, and then the minimum level of subscription is pretty cheap, like $10 a month, and then you can use Excel Online. You can do a lot of common spreadsheet things, kind of competes with Google Sheets in that way, and there are a wide array of apps available now, many hundreds, maybe 1,000. Solver is available as an app for Excel Online. Risk Solver, which is Monte Carlo simulation, is available for Excel Online. These are all free, by the way.
Wow.
If you know about the analysis tool pack in desktop Excel, that is not available as part of Excel Online per se, but there's a free app that does everything that the analysis tool pack does. That's something we did. And there's a bunch of others. One of my newest favorite apps, which we did not do, but somebody else did, I'll tip my hat to them. Its name is Send to Power BI, and it's free, and so you can be in Excel Online, building a spreadsheet and having some results or just some data on your spreadsheet, and you can select it, and then start up this app and send it to your Power BI account, and the effect of that is to turn it into a visuals, on your dashboard in Power BI right away.
Wow.
We think that's such a good idea that we're going to build that into Solver and Risk Solver and the Analysis Toolpack app and so on too.
Now the thing is, though, Microsoft has to get it together so that Power BI is shareable. Right now, it's only shareable if you share the same domain, and that does not include Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail. So yeah, that sharing, that's got to happen soon.
You can share it among multiple users, but you're right, they have to be using the same Power BI domain or account.
Right, and being a consultant, it doesn't help if I build something and I can only share it with me. So,
Sure, yeah.
Yes, but I hear that it is sweet. It's just a beautiful thing. We just got to be able to.
This is also, I can't say much more than this, except that this whole app story is going to get better and better over time.
Yes.
With future versions of Excel and things that you can do. There's already a Power BI app for your tablet or your phone, and what you're going to be able to do with Excel and Power BI and with Office and so on your tablet and phone and your desktop or your laptop is just getting better and better over time.
Wow. Yes, it is.
So speaking of sharing, where can you share, follow, and like us? Yeah, see what I did there? It's a nice segue there, huh? Well, we're all over the place. But in addition to that, hey, we're also on YouTube. And yeah, we need about three or five more people to follow us, and we reach our 2,000 subscribers. So I'd invite you to come over to YouTube and subscribe to us there, where you can get, anytime we release a new video, of which we release, gosh, I want to say about 170 or so a year. So about every other day, there's a video coming out from us. So that will show up in your YouTube account, and you'll have a chance to follow us there. In addition, we're on Twitter and just about every place that's important. You can also reach us over at Google Plus and be part of our HOA circle, our Hangout on Air circle. Just reach out to us and tell us you'd like to be involved in that. So, to close, Dan, as it was said, it's very rare we get to talk to somebody who has their own Wikipedia page, particularly whenever they didn't create the Wikipedia page themselves. So like I do. Who was there at the very beginning, who, met Steve Jobs, and was there kind of at the very beginning of creating, what we do and what our passion is now. So I got to tell you, the first, 20 minutes you were on the show, I was texting with Jordan, and I was in the background just saying, I don't want this guy to stop talking. I just kind of enjoy it, just sitting down and listening. So thank you so much for being a part of the show. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
They're my pleasure.
And I'll tell you what is I was working with Excel, and I didn't know it was a skill. I was just a guy solving problems. And remember, there was the layoff. The company laid off 300 of us, and they moved. And I decided this Excel thing seems to be something I can make work for me. And I remember after all of my savings was gone and everything else, and I had crossed over, and I went to Whole Foods and bought some toothpaste, and realized Excel bought this toothpaste. I remember that moment.
Sure enough.
That's because of you, Dan. Toothpaste.
Because of a lot of people.
A lot of people, yeah, a lot of people. Yeah.
But you can follow Dan over, is the president over at Frontline Systems. You can get him at solver.com. Any of the cool tools that you have on your desktop, whether that be the Solver add-in that's in Excel, or gosh, any of the minor tools. Would you mind giving us just a brief overview of the products and how people can go ahead and get a hold of you, Dan?
So yeah, you just go to the homepage of solver.com, and again, we won't try to share it.
Right.
But first of all, there are a set of free tools. There's a bunch of free examples. There's about 40 example models, all of which you can solve with a standard solver in Excel. There's links directly on solver.com, even on the homepage, to the free apps for Excel Online, Solver and Risk Solver, and Excel Minor Analysis Tool Pack. It's also a data visualization app, and also for Google Sheets. And then there are products that are sort of upgrades to the standard Excel solver that they run for. There's Premium Solver Pro, Premium Solver Platform, all the way up to Analytics Solver Platform, which is a very powerful suite. And then there's a set of tools for, really it's related to if you want to build an analytics application, something like an optimization application or a simulation risk analysis application outside Excel, but you're coming from an Excel world. First, we have a Solver SDK product, which developers can use in C++, C#, Java, JavaScript, and so on. But you can actually load and solve your Excel model in a application you build with Solver SDK. And then the very newest thing we have, it's actually, you would go to a separate site, rason.com, RASON.com, and there we're offering a modeling language embedded in JSON. That modeling language is actually based on the Excel formula language, but it's a very rich modeling language, and a REST API. So this is something you can use to add these analytics capabilities to a web or mobile application very easily. It's like drop dead simple.
Wow.
And so we're very much kind of spanning the world between desktop Excel, Excel Online, and things you might do outside Excel, but building from what you started with in Excel.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, Dan. We appreciate that. And hey, our next show is going to be May 19th, so 2 weeks from today. We'll be back. We have a very special guest lined up. So we appreciate that. And until that time, this is Rick Grantham along with Jordan Goldmeyer and Ozdu Saleh and Dan Fylstra saying, till next time, keep on excelling.